My name is Olivia Thompson, and I'm 34 years old. The moment my father threw my suitcase onto the front lawn and screamed, "No daughter of mine will disgrace this family with her perverted lifestyle," I thought I'd lost everything. What I didn't know was that 72 hours later, I'd inherit $50 million from the grandfather who'd been secretly watching it all unfold. The look on my mother's face when she realized what she'd done? Priceless. But let me tell you the whole story, because what happened next changed everything. Before we dive deep into this, if you've ever felt rejected by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, this story might hit close to home. Hit that like button if you believe love should never come with conditions, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with people who understand that family isn't always about blood. Now, let me take you back to the worst and best week of my life. It started on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, the same pink walls I'd begged to repaint since I was 15, working up the courage to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My laptop was open to photos of Sarah and me from our weekend in Vermont, her autumn red hair catching the sunlight, both of us laughing at something ridiculous she'd said. We'd been together for 2 years, and I was tired of hiding. The Thompson family had always been picture perfect on the outside. Dad, Robert Thompson, owned 3 successful auto dealerships in suburban Connecticut. Mom, Patricia, ran the church auxiliary and organized charity galas that made the local society pages. My older brother Marcus was the golden child, married to his college sweetheart, 2 kids, working his way up in Dad's business. And then there was me. I'd always been the odd one out. While Marcus played football, I joined debate team. While other girls in our neighborhood talked about boys and wedding dresses, I found myself staring a little too long at our female teachers. I'd dated boys through high school and college, convincing myself that the lack of spark was normal, that everyone felt that disconnect. It wasn't until I met Sarah at a marketing conference in Boston that everything clicked. She was brilliant, funny, and when she looked at me, I felt something I'd never experienced with any of the men I dated. For the first time in my life, everything made sense. But Connecticut old money families don't do different. They do tradition, appearances, and expectations. Coming out wasn't just about telling my parents I was gay, it was about shattering their entire vision of who I was supposed to be. I walked downstairs that Tuesday morning with my heart hammering against my ribs. Mom was in the kitchen, preparing her famous banana bread for the church bake sale. Dad sat at the breakfast table, reading the Wall Street Journal like he had every morning for the past 30 years. "Morning, sweetheart," Mom said without looking up from her mixing bowl. "I saved you some coffee." "Thanks, Mom." My voice sounded weird, too high. "Actually, I need to talk to you both about something important." Dad lowered his newspaper just enough to peer over the top. "If this is about needing money for that apartment in Hartford, Olivia, we've discussed this. You can live here rent-free until you find a suitable husband." At 28, I was apparently still their charity case. The daughter who worked in marketing but wasn't married, wasn't producing grandchildren, wasn't following the prescribed life path that had worked for generations of Thompson women. "It's not about money," I said, pulling out a chair at their perfectly set breakfast table. "It's about someone special in my life." Mom's face brightened immediately. She set down her wooden spoon and turned to face me with undisguised excitement. "Oh, Olivia. You've been so secretive lately. Is he from a good family? What does he do?" The pronoun hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, about to turn their world upside down, and Mom was already planning my hypothetical wedding to a man who didn't exist. "Her name is Sarah," I said quietly. The kitchen went completely silent. Dad's newspaper crinkled as his grip tightened. Mom's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to process words that didn't compute. "Her? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah Martinez. She's an environmental lawyer. We've been together for 2 years, and I love her. Dad's newspaper hit the table with a sharp crack. His face had gone from confusion to something darker. What exactly are you saying, Olivia? My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. I'm saying I'm gay, Dad. I'm in love with Sarah, and I want you to meet her. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then Mom started laughing. Not happy laughter, the kind of hysterical giggling that happens when someone's brain can't process reality. Gay? She repeated the word like it was foreign. Olivia, don't be ridiculous. You dated Tommy Henderson all through senior year. You went to prom with Michael Chin. Because I was trying to be what you wanted me to be, I said, my voice growing stronger. But that's not who I am. Dad stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. This is nonsense. You're confused. You've been spending too much time in those liberal cities, letting people fill your head with ideas. It's not an idea, Dad. It's who I am. No. His voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. No daughter of mine is going to be a, he couldn't even say the word. This is some phase, some rebellion. You'll snap out of it. I'd expected denial. I'd expected them to need time to adjust. What I hadn't expected was the complete erasure of my identity, like I was a malfunctioning appliance they could simply reset. I'm not rebelling, I said, standing to match his height. I'm finally being honest with you about who I've always been. Mom's laughter had turned to tears. She gripped the edge of the counter like she might collapse. Where did we go wrong? We raised you in the church. We gave you everything. How could you choose this lifestyle? I didn't choose to be gay any more than you chose to be straight, I shot back. And it's not a lifestyle, it's my life. That's when Dad exploded. His face turned scarlet, veins bulging in his temples. Don't you dare compare your perversion to normal relationships. We will not tolerate this sickness in our house. The word sickness hit me like a slap. There's nothing sick about love. Love? Dad's voice dripped with disgust. You call what those people do love? It's an abomination. The Bible is very clear about, the Bible also says not to judge others, I interrupted. And to love your neighbor as yourself. Don't quote scripture at me, young lady. Not when you're living in sin. Mom wiped her eyes with a dish towel, smearing mascara across her cheeks. Olivia, we can fix this. There are therapies, programs. Pastor Williams knows people who've helped others overcome these temptations. Conversion therapy. My own mother was suggesting conversion therapy. I don't need to be fixed because I'm not broken, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I need my parents to love me for who I am. Who you are. Dad stepped closer, his presence intimidating in the small kitchen. You're throwing away everything we've built, everything this family stands for. Our reputation, our standing in the community, your reputation matters more than your daughter's happiness? Our daughter wouldn't put us in this position, he roared. The conversation spiraled from there. Mom cried about what the neighbors would think, what the church would say. Dad ranted about family values and moral decay. Every word felt like another door slamming shut between us. Finally, I played the card I'd hoped I wouldn't need. Grandpa Joe would want you to accept me. Grandpa Joe, Dad's father, had been my favorite person in the world. He'd died when I was 25, just 3 months before I met Sarah. He was the one person in our family who'd ever made me feel like I could be myself. He used to tell me stories about traveling the world, meeting different kinds of people, learning that love came in all shapes and forms. Dad's face went white at the mention of his father. Don't you dare bring your grandfather into this. He was a God-fearing man who believed in traditional values. He believed in love, I countered. Real love, not the conditional kind you're offering me. That's when Dad lost it completely. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me, his eyes wild with rage. You will not destroy this family with your selfishness. You'll go upstairs, pack your things, and you'll leave. And you won't come back until you've come to your senses. I stared at him in shock. You're kicking me out? I'm giving you a choice, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Give up this sick fantasy and be our daughter, or leave and don't come back. Mom sobbed louder. Robert, please, no. He whirled on her. Patricia, we've coddled her too long. Sometimes love means making hard choices. I looked between my parents, the people who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cheered at my graduation, who'd supposedly loved me unconditionally for 28 years. Now they were giving me an ultimatum, be straight or be homeless. I choose Sarah, I said quietly. I choose to be happy. Dad's face crumpled with disappointment and rage. Then you're no daughter of mine. The next hour was a blur of thrown clothes and shattered memories. Dad literally packed my suitcase, throwing in random items like he couldn't wait to erase all evidence of my existence. Mom locked herself in their bedroom, her sobs echoing through the house. My brother Marcus arrived just as Dad was carrying my luggage to the front lawn. He took one look at the scene and immediately understood. Really, Dad? Marcus said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You're actually doing this? Your sister made her choice, Dad replied coldly. Marcus turned to me, his expression conflicted. Olivia, is it true? Are you gay? I nodded, too emotionally drained to speak. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking torn between family loyalty and basic decency. Look, I don't understand it, but you're still my sister. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Then Dad stepped between us. Marcus, you have children to think about. You can't expose them to this influence. My brother's face changed. The protective older brother I'd grown up with disappeared, replaced by a man more concerned with appearances than family bonds. I'm sorry, Becca, he said quietly. But Dad's right. I have to think about Emma and Jake. My 5-year-old niece and 3-year-old nephew, who I'd babysat countless times, who called me their favorite aunt, were apparently too young to be around their gay relative. Standing on that front lawn with my hastily packed suitcase, watching my family turn their backs on me, I felt more alone than I'd ever imagined possible. The house I'd grown up in, the people who'd raised me, all of it was gone in the span of 2 hours. I called Sarah from my car, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. Where are you? She asked immediately, her lawyer instincts kicking in. My parents kicked me out, I managed between tears. They said I'm not their daughter anymore. Come home, she said without hesitation. Come home to me. Sarah lived in a cozy apartment in Hartford's Arts District. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and accepting and everything my childhood home had failed to be. She held me while I cried, made me tea, and didn't say, I told you so, even though she'd warned me this might happen. I'm sorry, I whispered against her shoulder. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. Hey, she pulled back to look at me, her green eyes fierce with protective love. Their loss is my gain. Besides, now I get to have you all to myself without sneaking around. For 3 days, I wallowed in grief and rejection. I called in sick to work, ignored texts from extended family members who'd heard the news, and tried to process the fact that I was officially an orphan by choice. that's when everything changed. Friday afternoon, while Sarah was at work and I was stress-eating ice cream in my pajamas, my phone rang. Unknown number. Olivia Thompson? The voice was professional, male, unfamiliar. Speaking. This is David Richardson from Richardson, Wells and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Joseph Thompson. Grandpa Joe. My heart clenched at the mention of his name. I'm sorry, but Grandpa's estate was settled 3 years ago, I said, confused. Actually, Ms. Thompson, there was a sealed portion of the will that was only to be opened under specific circumstances. Those circumstances have now been met. I frowned, sitting up straighter on Sarah's couch. What kind of circumstances? The will stipulated that if you were ever disowned or rejected by your family due to your sexual orientation, a separate inheritance would be activated. The ice cream container slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. I'm sorry, what? Your grandfather left very specific instructions. He suspected that your family might not accept your sexuality, and he wanted to ensure you were protected if that situation arose. My mind reeled. Grandpa Joe had known? Had suspected I was gay before I'd even figured it out myself? Mr. Richardson, I think there's been some mistake. No mistake, Ms. Thompson. Your grandfather was quite clear. He established a separate trust fund of $50 million, to be released to you if you were ever rejected by the family for being gay. $50 million. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what I was hearing. He knew? Your grandfather was a very perceptive man. He also included a letter for you, which I'm authorized to deliver along with the inheritance documents. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? 2 hours later, I sat in a downtown law office, staring at documents that changed everything. David Richardson, a distinguished man in his 60s, slid a sealed envelope across his mahogany desk. Your grandfather insisted this be delivered personally, he said gently. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded a letter written in Grandpa Joe's familiar handwriting. My dearest Olivia, asterisk if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Your father has allowed his prejudice to overcome his love for you. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I hoped I was wrong about how they'd react, but I've known Robert my whole life, and I know his limitations. Asterisk asterisk I've suspected since you were a teenager that you might be different from what your parents expected. The way you looked at the world, the questions you asked, the sensitivity you showed, it reminded me of my dear friend William, who had to hide who he was his entire life because society wasn't ready for him. Asterisk asterisk I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with who you are. Love is love, Olivia, and anyone who tells you otherwise is speaking from fear, not wisdom. Asterisk asterisk this money isn't charity, it's an investment in your happiness. Use it to build the life you want, with the people who accept and celebrate you. Don't let your father's narrow-mindedness limit your potential. Asterisk asterisk I'm proud of you for being brave enough to be yourself, even when it cost you everything. That takes courage I wish I'd had at your age. Asterisk live boldly, love deeply, and remember that the family we choose is often stronger than the family we're born into. All my love, Grandpa Joe asterisk P.S. Your father doesn't know about the business investments I made over the years, or the properties I acquired. He thinks his inheritance was everything. He's in for quite a surprise. Asterisk I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Grandpa Joe had not only known about my sexuality, he'd planned for this exact scenario. He protected me in a way my own parents couldn't. There's more, Mr. Richardson said gently, sliding another document across the desk. Your grandfather also left you controlling interest in several properties and businesses that your father is currently managing, including a 40% stake in Thompson Auto Group. My father's business. The empire he'd built his entire identity around. And I now owned nearly half of it. he doesn't know? Your father believes he inherited everything. Your grandfather's will was strategically structured. The business shares were held in a blind trust that your father has been managing, but the ownership was always conditional. I stared at the documents, my mind spinning. Not only was I suddenly worth $50 million, but I had the power to destroy the man who'd just disowned me. What are my options? I asked. Mr. Richardson smiled. Well, Ms. Thompson, you could sell your shares, you could become an active partner in the business, or you could exercise your right as majority shareholder to make some changes to the company's management structure. That evening, Sarah came home to find me sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and looking shell-shocked. Babe? What's all this? She set down her briefcase and moved to massage my shoulders. My grandfather left me $50 million, I said, the words feeling surreal. Sarah's hands stilled on my shoulders. I'm sorry, what? I explained everything, the letter, the inheritance, the business shares. With each revelation, Sarah's eyes grew wider. So you're telling me that not only are you now worth $50 million, but you essentially own your father's business? The same business he used to justify throwing you out? Apparently. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Then she started laughing, not the hysterical kind my mother had done, but genuine, amazed laughter. Your grandfather was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, she said, shaking her head in admiration. Olivia, do you realize what this means? That I don't have to worry about money anymore? No, babe. It means you have choices. Real choices about how you want to handle what they did to you. That night, lying in Sarah's arms, I thought about those choices. I could take the money and disappear, start fresh somewhere far from Connecticut and my toxic family. I could be generous and forgive, using my new financial power to force them to accept me. Or I could let them experience exactly what it felt like to lose everything for being who they were. Saturday morning brought the first crack in my family's perfect facade. Marcus called, his voice tight with forced casualness. Hey, Becca. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I said, not elaborating. Look, I know things got heated the other day. Maybe we all overreacted, I interrupted. I seem to remember that I was the one getting thrown out onto the lawn. Right. About that. Mom's been crying nonstop, and Dad's being Dad. But Emma keeps asking where Aunt Becca is, and I think maybe we should all sit down and talk. Talk about what, Marcus? About how you all decided I was too dangerous to be around your children? About how being gay makes me a bad influence? That's not, he sighed heavily. Okay, maybe we handled it wrong. But you're still family. Funny. That's not what Dad said when he told me I wasn't his daughter anymore. There was a long pause. Then Marcus played his card, he's struggling, Becca. The stress of all this is affecting his health. His blood pressure is through the roof, and Mom's worried he might have a heart attack. Emotional manipulation. Of course. That's unfortunate, I said coolly. Maybe he should see a doctor. Olivia, please. Just come to dinner tomorrow. Let's work this out as a family. I almost laughed. After 3 days of radio silence, after publicly disowning me, now they wanted family dinner? I'll think about it, I said and hung up. But I'd already made my decision. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I drove to my childhood home for the first time since being kicked out, but this time I wasn't the desperate daughter begging for acceptance. I was Olivia Thompson, heiress to a $50 million fortune and secret owner of my father's business. The house looked exactly the same, but I felt completely different walking up that familiar driveway. I had power now. Real power. Mom answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed and hopeful. Olivia. Oh, thank God you came. I've been so worried. Hello, Mother. My tone stopped her mid-sentence. There was no warmth in it, no desperate desire for reconciliation. Just cold politeness. Dad appeared behind her, looking older than he had just 4 days ago. The stress Marcus had mentioned was evident in his pale complexion and the nervous way he kept adjusting his tie. Olivia, he said stiffly. Thank you for coming. Of course. We have things to discuss. Marcus and his wife Jennifer were already in the dining room with Emma and Jake. The kids ran to hug me, their innocent affection a sharp contrast to the adults' awkward tension. Aunt Becca. Emma squealed. Daddy said you were sick. Are you better now? I'm much better, sweetheart, I said, kneeling to hug her properly. How are you? Good. I lost a tooth. See? She opened her mouth to show me the gap. That's wonderful. Did the tooth fairy visit? Uh-huh. She gave me $5. Emma, go wash your hands for dinner, Jennifer interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the normalcy of our interaction. As the kids scampered off, the adults settled around the dining room table. Mom had prepared all my favorite foods, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. The perfect family dinner, if you ignored the elephant in the room. So, Dad began after we'd all filled our plates. I think we need to address what happened earlier this week. Yes, let's, I agreed, cutting my pot roast with surgical precision. Your mother and I may have overreacted to your news. We were shocked, and we didn't handle it well. It wasn't an apology, just an acknowledgement that their reaction had been imperfect. Overreacted, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Mom jumped in, her voice pleading. Olivia, we love you. You're our daughter, and nothing will ever change that. We just need time to understand. Time to understand what, exactly? This phase you're going through, Dad said carefully. This confusion about your sexuality. And there it was. They still didn't get it. It's not a phase, Dad. And I'm not confused. I'm gay. I've always been gay. The only confusion was thinking I could be anything else to make you happy. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Marcus kept his eyes on his plate. But you could be happy with a nice man, Mom insisted. You just haven't met the right one yet. I have met the right person. Her name is Sarah, and I love her. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dad set down his fork with deliberate control. Olivia, we've discussed this. We can't support that lifestyle, then we have a problem, I interrupted. What do you mean? Mom asked nervously. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. I mean that some interesting information has come to light since our last conversation. Dad's eyes fixed on the folder with suspicion. What kind of information? The kind that changes everything. I opened the folder and slid a document across the table. Did you know that Grandpa Joe left me $50 million? The effect was immediate and dramatic. Dad went completely white. Mom gasped audibly. Marcus choked on his wine. That's impossible, Dad stammered. The will was read 3 years ago. Everything was settled. Everything you knew about was settled, I corrected. But Grandpa had a separate trust, one that was only activated under specific circumstances. What circumstances? Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he was beginning to understand. If I was ever rejected by this family for being gay. The silence was deafening. Dad stared at the document like it might burst into flames. Mom's hand flew to her throat. He knew, she whispered. He suspected. And he planned accordingly. I slid another document across the table. He also left me this. Dad picked up the paper with trembling hands. As he read, his face went from white to green. 40% of Thompson Auto Group, he read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Which makes me the largest single shareholder, I said pleasantly. Interesting position to be in, don't you think? Marcus leaned over to read the document, his face falling as he understood the implications. Becca, you can't be serious. About what? About being gay, or about owning Dad's business? Both. Dad exploded, slamming the paper down on the table. This is extortion. No, Dad, this is inheritance. Grandpa Joe left me these assets because he loved me unconditionally, something you've proven incapable of doing. Mom was crying again, but these weren't tears of disappointment. These were tears of fear. Olivia, please, she begged. We can work this out. We can learn to accept what, Mom? Me, or my money? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Dad struggled to regain his composure. This doesn't change anything. You're still living in sin, and we still can't support that. Fine, I said, standing up from the table. Then you won't mind when I exercise my rights as majority shareholder. What does that mean? Jennifer asked nervously. I looked directly at my father. It means that as of Monday morning, I'll be taking an active role in Thompson Auto Group. Starting with some changes to the management structure. Dad's face went purple. You can't run a business. You work in marketing. I work in automotive marketing, specifically. I think I'll manage just fine. The truth was, I had no intention of actually running Dad's business, but he didn't need to know that yet. Besides, I continued, I'll have plenty of help from my new advisory board. Sarah's environmental law firm has some fascinating insights about automotive emission standards that Thompson Auto Group should probably be implementing. The implication was clear, not only would I be running his business, but my gay girlfriend would be helping me do it. Marcus tried one last time to play peacemaker. Becca, come on. Don't do this out of anger. You're better than that. Am I? Because 4 days ago, you all made it very clear that I'm not good enough to be part of this family. Now suddenly I'm too good to use the resources Grandpa left me? It's not about the money, Mom started. Isn't it? Because you didn't seem particularly concerned about my well-being when you were throwing me out. But now that you know I have $50 million and control of Dad's business, suddenly you want to work things out. Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I built that business with my bare hands. You can't just waltz in and destroy everything I've worked for. You mean the way you destroyed our relationship with your bigotry? Don't you dare compare the two. Why not? You took something precious and threw it away because it didn't meet your expectations. Seems like fair play to me. The room erupted in chaos. Dad yelling about ungrateful children and family loyalty. Mom sobbing about how this would kill her. Marcus trying to mediate while Jennifer grabbed the kids and rushed them upstairs. Through it all, I remained calm. This was exactly what I'd expected, what I'd hoped for, if I was being honest. I'll give you the same choice you gave me, I said when the shouting died down. Accept me for who I am, embrace Sarah as part of the family, and we can find a way to work together. Or continue to reject me, and face the consequences. What consequences? Dad demanded. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Monday morning, I'm calling an emergency shareholder meeting. Given my 40% stake, plus the proxies I've already secured from 3 other minority shareholders, I have enough votes to remove you as CEO. The color drained from Dad's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Would you like to test that theory? Mom collapsed into her chair, hyperventilating. Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Furthermore, I continued, as the new majority owner, I'll be implementing some policy changes. Thompson Auto Group will be participating in this year's Pride Parade, with a rainbow-wrapped float. We'll be offering same-sex partner benefits to all employees. And we'll be making a substantial donation to LGBTQ+ youth organizations in Connecticut. Over my dead body, Dad snarled. That's your choice, I said, gathering my documents. But it's happening with or without you. I headed for the door, then paused at the threshold of the dining room, the same room where I'd had countless family dinners, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where I'd once felt safe and loved. For what it's worth, I said quietly, I would have given anything for you to just love me. The money, the business shares, none of it matters as much as having my family's acceptance would have. Mom looked up at me through her tears. Olivia, please, but you made your choice, I continued. And now I'm making mine. I walked out of that house for the second time in a week, but this time I wasn't the broken, rejected daughter. I was a woman with options, with power, and with the resources to protect myself from ever being hurt like that again. Monday morning brought the reckoning I'd promised. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Thompson Auto Group headquarters wearing my best power suit and carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. The receptionist, Mrs. Chen, who'd known me since I was a teenager, did a double take. Olivia? What are you doing here? I'm here for the emergency shareholder meeting, I said pleasantly. What meeting? There's nothing on Mr. Thompson's calendar. David Richardson appeared beside me, flanked by 2 other lawyers. The meeting Ms. Thompson called as majority shareholder, he said smoothly. We sent the notification Friday evening, as required by corporate bylaws. Mrs. Chen's confusion was palpable, but she dutifully called upstairs to Dad's office. I could hear his voice through the receiver, loud and panicked. He'll see you now, she said weakly. Dad's corner office looked exactly as I remembered, mahogany furniture, family photos, awards from the local Chamber of Commerce. But the man behind the desk was a shadow of the confident businessman I'd grown up fearing. His tie was crooked, his hair disheveled, and his hands shook as he flipped through the legal documents Mr. Richardson had just served him. This is ridiculous, he said without looking up. You can't just take over my company because you're angry about a family disagreement. I'm not taking over because I'm angry, I replied, settling into the chair across from his desk. I'm taking over because I own it. You own 40%, plus the 15% proxy from the Henderson Trust, plus the 12% from Sarah's uncle's investment firm. I smiled at his shocked expression. Turns out environmental lawyers know a lot of business people who don't appreciate homophobia. Dad's face went ashen. That's 67%. Which makes me the controlling shareholder, yes. Marcus burst through the office door, clearly having rushed over from his own building. Becca, what the hell are you doing? I'm conducting business, Marcus. Would you like to stay for the meeting? This is insane. You can't destroy Dad's life's work because he hurt your feelings. I stood up slowly, letting the full weight of my new position settle in the room. Hurt my feelings? Marcus, he didn't hurt my feelings. He disowned me. He threw me out of our family home because of who I love. He told me I wasn't his daughter anymore. But that doesn't give you the right. It gives me the exact right that Grandpa Joe intended me to have, I interrupted. The right to protect myself from people who would rather see me homeless than happy. Dad finally found his voice. "What do you want, Olivia?" It was the first time in my life I'd heard him sound genuinely defeated. "I want Thompson Auto Group to be a company I can be proud to own," I said. "I want it to reflect values of inclusion and acceptance. I want it to be the kind of place where a gay employee doesn't have to hide who they are to keep their job. And if I refuse? Then you can clean out your office. I have a replacement CEO ready to start immediately." The bluff worked perfectly. Dad's face crumpled as he realized I held all the cards. "You'd really destroy everything I built?" "You destroyed everything we built the minute you chose prejudice over your daughter," I said softly. "I'm just giving you the chance to rebuild a better." The negotiation took 3 hours. In the end, Dad agreed to stay on as CEO under my oversight, with the understanding that Thompson Auto Group's policies would change to reflect my values. Marcus would continue in his current role, but both he and Dad would undergo sensitivity training. The company would sponsor Pride events, offer full benefits to same-sex couples, and donate substantial amounts to LGBTQ+ organizations. Any discrimination complaints would be handled by an outside firm I selected. Most importantly, there would be a prominent photo in the lobby, me and Sarah together, smiling, with a plaque reading Olivia Thompson, owner and board chair. As the lawyers finalized the paperwork, Dad sat slumped in his chair, looking every one of his 62 years. "How did it come to this?" he asked quietly. "You tell me," I replied. "You're the one who decided that having a gay daughter was worse than having no daughter at all." That evening, Sarah and I celebrated at Hartford's nicest restaurant. She raised her wine glass in a toast. "To Grandpa Joe," she said, "for seeing the future and protecting the woman he loved." "To Grandpa Joe," I agreed, "and to never having to hide again." The changes at Thompson Auto Group happened quickly. The Pride float was the biggest hit of Hartford's parade, with Dad awkwardly waving from the passenger seat while I drove, wearing my rainbow shirt with Pride. Local news covered the story, framing it as a heartwarming tale of family reconciliation and corporate responsibility. They had no idea how unwilling that reconciliation had been. Mom and Dad's friends at the country club struggled to process the new reality. Their daughter was not only openly gay but also incredibly wealthy and powerful. The social dynamics shifted overnight, where once they'd received sympathy for having a difficult daughter, now they were envied for having such a successful one. The cognitive dissonance was visible at every family gathering. They wanted to bask in my financial success while still disapproving of my sexuality. It created a constant tension that never fully resolved. Marcus adapted better than I'd expected. The sensitivity training had actually opened his eyes to some of his own biases, and he made genuine efforts to include Sarah in family events. His kids adored their Aunt Sarah, which helped normalize our relationship for the adults. But the real victory came 6 months later, when Mom called to ask if Sarah and I would host Christmas dinner. "The house is big enough," she said carefully, and Sarah mentioned she makes excellent prime rib. It wasn't acceptance, exactly. But it was acknowledgement that we weren't going anywhere. Sarah and I moved into a stunning colonial house in West Hartford's best neighborhood, 3 doors down from the mayor and directly across from Dad's biggest business rival. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. We hosted dinner parties for Hartford's elite, including several same-sex couples. Mom and Dad attended these events with gritted teeth, smile nodding through conversations about marriage equality and adoption rights. The funniest moment came when Governor Harrison's husband complimented Mom on raising such an accomplished daughter. "Olivia is a real credit to your family," he said warmly. "You must be so proud of how she's modernized Thompson Auto Group." Mom's smile looked like it might crack her face. "We're very proud," she managed. Later, I found her in our kitchen, stress-eating the expensive cheese I'd bought for the party. "This is hard for me," she admitted quietly. I know, I said, and I meant it. But it's been hard for me my whole life. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm trying, Olivia. I really am. I know you are. And that means everything to me. It wasn't the relationship I'd dreamed of having with my mother, but it was honest. And after years of pretending to be someone I wasn't, honesty felt like a luxury. The Thompson Auto Group thrived under its new policies. Employee satisfaction went up, customer complaints went down, and we won 3 awards for workplace inclusivity. Dad grudgingly admitted that my changes had been good for business. More importantly, I'd created the kind of workplace I wished had existed when I was younger, a place where LGBTQ+ employees could bring their whole selves to work without fear. My favorite moment came when a young sales associate named Kevin thanked me for the partner benefits policy. My boyfriend and I are finally getting married, he said, his eyes bright with happiness. And for the first time in my life, I don't have to worry about whether my job is safe because of who I love. That made every difficult conversation with my parents worth it. Sarah and I got engaged on the 2-year anniversary of my coming out. I proposed in the exact spot where Dad had thrown my suitcase onto the lawn, transforming that painful memory into something beautiful. When I called to tell my parents about the engagement, there was a long pause. When? Mom asked finally. Next spring. We're thinking May. Another pause. Then, will you want us there? The question broke my heart a little. After everything we'd been through, she still wasn't sure if she was welcome in my life. Of course I want you there, I said. You're my parents. I've always wanted you there. The wedding was beautiful. Mom cried during the ceremony, happy tears, for once. Dad walked me down the aisle with his head held high, and when the minister asked who was giving me away, he said clearly, her mother and I. It wasn't the fairy tale acceptance I'd dreamed of as a child, but it was real. Imperfect, complicated, and real. In my wedding speech, I thanked Grandpa Joe for teaching me that love comes in many forms, and that the most important love is the kind we have for ourselves. He couldn't be here today, I said, looking out at the crowd of family, friends, and colleagues, but his wisdom made this day possible. He taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up for you when it matters most. Sarah and I honeymooned in Italy, staying in the same villa where Grandpa Joe had vacationed with his friend William 60 years earlier. We found a photo of them together in the hotel's guest book, 2 young men with their arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera with the fearless joy of people who'd found love despite the world's disapproval. I understood then why Grandpa had been so determined to protect me. He'd seen what happened when love had to hide in shadows, and he'd wanted something better for me. Standing on that Italian balcony with Sarah in my arms, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean gold, I felt the full weight of the gift he'd given me. Not just the money or the business shares, but the freedom to be myself without apology. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emma drew a picture of you and Sarah at the wedding. She says you're her favorite aunts. I showed Sarah the message, and we both smiled. Your grandfather would be proud, she said, kissing my temple. Yeah, I agreed, thinking about the letter he'd left me, about his friend William who'd never had the chance to live openly, about the courage it took to love authentically in a world that didn't always accept it. I think he would be. The most satisfying moment came a year later, when the Hartford Business Journal featured Thompson Auto Group on its cover as Connecticut's most inclusive employer. The photo showed me and Sarah cutting the ribbon at our new headquarters, with Mom and Dad standing proudly behind us. Dad had fought me every step of the way, but he couldn't argue with the results. The company was more profitable than ever, our employee retention was the highest in the industry, and we'd attracted top talent from across New England who wanted to work for a company that valued diversity. But the real victory was smaller, more personal. It was Dad introducing Sarah as his daughter-in-law at the country club. It was Mom asking for Sarah's recipe for Christmas cookies. It was my niece and nephew drawing pictures of our family that included both of their aunts without question. It was the gradual, grudging, imperfect evolution of people who'd chosen fear over love, learning to choose differently. Looking back, I wouldn't change how it happened. The pain of being rejected by my family forced me to build a stronger foundation for my life, one based on my own values rather than their expectations. Grandpa Joe's inheritance gave me the power to protect myself and create change, but the real gift was his unwavering belief that I deserved love exactly as I was. If you're struggling with family rejection, or if you know someone who is, remember that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to accept less than we deserve. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. And sometimes, the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and being true to yourself? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I want you to know that your courage matters. Hit that subscribe button if you believe love should never come with conditions, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that their authentic self is worth fighting for.